Hello, my name is Eric Janessi. I'm the Director of Education here at OHI, and I'd like to welcome you today to our course, Fitting Therapeutic Footwear, which is presented by the OHI Foot Health Resource Center. So before we get started, I just want to share with you the story of Apex Shoes. Of course, Apex is our wonderful line of therapeutic footwear here at OHI. So Apex has a rich history, actually dating back to the 1940s, when the Schwartz brothers, Paul and Charles, actually founded the company in Manhattan, New York. Originally, it was a shoe store, and they focused on arch supports and shoe repair components. It evolved under the leadership of Paul Schwartz's son, Richard. The first Apex shoe, introduced in 1971, was a shoe designed to address foot injuries and foot problems, and it quickly earned a reputation as a healing shoe. By the late 1990s, Apex had established itself as a leader in the field of therapeutic footwear, and then eventually expanded into the athletic shoe world as well. The company's commitment to health and wellness continued to grow, culminating in its acquisition by OHI in 2015. This partnership revitalized Apex's focus on combining style and comfort, leading to the introduction of new and innovative footwear designs. Today, as part of the OHI family, Apex is a proven leader and innovator in the therapeutic footwear marketplace. All right, let's talk about the therapeutic shoe bill. Okay, in the United States, we tend to focus on what Medicare covers when it comes to the therapeutic shoe, or what some people call the diabetic shoe world. At one point, there was no coverage for shoes or inserts for patients that had diabetes. Actually, in 1987, Congress passed a bill. It was called the Therapeutic Shoe Bill. It was part of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1987. So that was actually enacted on December 22nd of 1987. President Reagan signed that into law. Of course, it's the government, it's Medicare, so it just kind of sat there for a few years. It didn't actually go live until 6 years later. On May 1st of 1993, for the first time, Medicare beneficiaries in the United States had those benefits available to them. If they had diabetes and they had foot problems associated with their diabetes, they were now eligible to actually receive therapeutic footwear and inserts for the first time. So in order to be eligible to use this benefit, a patient has to have, obviously, Medicare, but then number two, they have to have diabetes. That's not enough. They have to have Medicare, diabetes, and one of 6 very specific qualifying foot conditions. As long as those criteria are met, now that the beneficiary is eligible to receive special shoes and inserts to help prevent problems in their feet due to diabetes, and that is all covered under Medicare. So who can be a supplier? Okay, again, this is Medicare in the US, who can be a supplier for the therapeutic shoe benefit. It gets a little confusing. So when this came out, when the benefit was enacted in 1993, the original verbiage said you had to be a podiatrist or other qualified individual. The definition has evolved some over the years. The way it currently reads today, I'm recording this in 2026, the way it reads today is you have to be a podiatrist, podorthist, orthotist, prosthetist, or other qualified individual. They still have the or other qualified individual language in there. We've been thinking this whole time, our profession has been thinking, well, they're going to define that, they're going to get rid of it. But heck, it's been 33 years since this benefit's been around, almost 40 years since it was enacted into law. They're not going to change that. The or other qualified individual is not going anywhere. So it is a little bit of a gray area. You won't find anything in writing clearly defining what constitutes an or other qualified individual. What I can tell you is based on hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations with customers over the years that have been audited by Medicare. What Medicare is looking at when they come in is they want to see proof that you have had adequate training in fitting diabetic shoes and inserts. And most of the time, they're actually very specific. They want to see training that has occurred within the last 5 years. So that's what makes an or other qualified individual. Okay, you have to have proof of training within the last 5 years. You know, is it recommended to go on and become an ABC certified fitter of therapeutic shoes? Of course. Or even a podorthist or an orthotist. But as far as Medicare is concerned, that or other qualified individual just means that you have to have the training. Now, the other thing you have to look at is your state laws. Okay, again, in the United States, there's a number of states that actually have state level licensure for orthotics and prosthetics. So you would want to check with your state as well. Sometimes the state licensing boards, they're not the easiest organizations to, navigate their websites. So what I would recommend, actually a good place to start with that is contact whatever accrediting organization does your facility accreditation, and they can help you determine what the actual state statutes might be. All right, so let's talk about what is actually covered under this benefit. So for patients meeting those criteria that I outlined a couple slides ago, Medicare, diabetes, at least one of the qualifying foot conditions, they will cover one pair of shoes, and that can be either off-the-shelf extra depth shoes, or it can be custom shoes, but they'll pay for one pair of shoes and 3 pairs of inserts. The inserts can be custom inserts, okay, like this, or they can be a heat moldable insert like this, but they'll pay for 3 pairs. So 1 pair of shoes, 3 pairs of inserts every calendar year. That is part of this, again, that causes a lot of confusion. A lot of the other insurances, if maybe they have Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Healthcare, Aetna, Humana, whatever, as their secondary insurance, they have their own rules. And sometimes the private insurers, they may say, no, you're not eligible until a year from the date that you receive your last pair of shoes. That's not the case with Medicare. It is a calendar year benefit. As soon as the calendar changes from December 31st to January 1st, they are eligible again. Now, would I recommend getting them a pair in December and another pair in January? No, because you don't know what the coming year is going to bring, right? Let's wait and see and kind of get those shoes, more when they, I'll say, air quotes, need it. But that's not the Medicare rule, okay? It is a calendar year benefit. So yes, as soon as the calendar year changes over, they're eligible again. So if we look at the codes, you'll see on your screen. So A5500 is the HCPCS code. That's the billing code for the shoes. And A5500 is the prefabricated off-the-shelf shoes. So the long definition of that is for diabetics only, fitting, including follow-up. I'm going to come back to that. Custom preparation and supply of off-the-shelf shoe inlay manufactured to accommodate multi-density inserts. Where you see in the parentheses where it says including follow-up, it's important to note all of these codes under the therapeutic shoe benefit, they're all-inclusive codes. So what that means is if the patient is coming in to pick up their shoes, right? You've done the assessment, you've measured for shoes, you've taken a scan of their foot, now you've got the inserts and shoes there. If they're coming into your office just to pick up the shoes, to be fit, make sure everything is good, all looks good, they walk in it, you're happy with it, you can't charge an office visit for that. That's all included, okay? The evaluation, the fitting, the follow-up, any adjustments, these are all inclusive codes. Okay, so I just want to be clear on that. A5501, that's the custom shoe code. And then there are some shoe modifications that are covered. A5503 through A5506, they're modifications that actually can be swapped out for inserts if you have a prescription for that and have a desire to do that. Let's talk about these guys, the heat moldable inserts. Okay, there's 2 codes that reference these inserts. One is A5510. The other is A5512. If you look on your screen, you can see there's very different definitions there, okay? So A5510 is a heat moldable insert that you just pulled out of the box or bag and you're holding it in your hands and you put it in the patient's shoe and send them out the door. That's A5510. A5512 is when you take that insert and you heat it, either using a heat gun or a convection oven, to a minimum temperature, as you see on the screen, of 230 degrees, and then you mold it to their foot. So this, when you heat it and mold it directly to their foot, magically goes from an A5510 to an A5512. Why does that matter? A5510 is not a billable code. It's not a reimbursable code. I hate that Medicare does that. Why assign a code to something that you're not going to pay for, that you can't even technically bill? But they did. Okay. So I've been involved in patient care and education, all told well over 30 years at this point. And in the last 10 years, I probably have I've taught over, probably 200, 250 shoe fitter courses. And every single course I would ask my students, I would say, okay, who provides heat moldable inserts? And then half the class would raise their hand. And then I would say, and who heats them and molds them every single time? And about half of people would sort of timidly raise their hand and look around, and, not everybody's raising their hand. And that's not appropriate. Okay. If you're billing A5512, you're telling Medicare that you heated it and molded it to their foot. Okay. If you're dispensing this and not actually heating it and molding it to their foot, that's an A5510. Okay. And I don't have to tell you what it's called when you give a patient one thing and bill them something else. Or maybe I do have to tell you. That's called Medicare fraud. And we don't want to do that. Okay, so if you're going to bill A5512, please heat the insert and mold it to the foot. I'm going to show you how to do that. If you're not positive how to do that, I've got a demo on that. I'll show you exactly how to do that. Super simple, very easy, very straightforward, but very important to do it, obviously for the sake of the patient, but also to keep yourself on Medicare's good side. All right, and then there are two codes that talk about custom foot orthoses, A5513 and A5514. So A5513 is multi-density insert, custom molded from a model of the patient's foot, total contact with the patient's foot, including the arch, base layer, minimum of 3/16 inch material, Shore A35 diameter or higher, including arch filler and other shaping material, custom fabricated each. Sorry I had to read that whole thing, but it's important, and you'll see why on the next screen. Okay, look at the picture on the screen. Okay, I'm going to show you this right here. Okay, this is an A5513. Now we'll go to the next screen, A5514. Notice the picture there. It looks exactly the same, doesn't it? And here's an A5514. You cannot tell these apart. They're exactly the same. Well, why is there two codes? The codes describe how the device was actually fabricated. It has nothing to do with what you do. It's not like one is made from a foam impression, one is made from a scan. It's not how you order it. It is purely on the manufacturer for how they manufactured the device. So A5514, multiple density insert made by direct carving with CAM technology from a rectified CAD model. So that's computer aided manufacturing technology from a rectified computer aided design model, created from a digitized scan of the patient, total contact with the patient's foot. The rest of that is all the same. So those two codes describe literally the exact same device, the exact same end product. It's just, how did we get there? Did we do old school 1960s technology and pour us a plaster cast and heat up the materials in the oven and vacuum form them over the cast of the foot? Or did we take that foam box and get a digitized scan of it, or take a digitized scan that you sent us directly, and our CAD team creates a digital version of the insert, and then we send that information to the milling machine and it carves out the device? Okay, so you may be saying, well, why do I need to know that? Well, because you need to make sure that you're actually billing it correctly. Okay, so you do need to have a little bit of an understanding on how the inserts you're dispensing were made so that you can bill them appropriately, and again, not get dinged on a questionable code or if you get an audit. All right, now when it comes to those, I mentioned there are some shoe modification codes that can actually be swapped out or substituted for inserts. Key thing to know here is that that's exactly what they're doing. They're being substituted on a one-to-one basis. So if you had a patient that was getting a pair of in-depth shoes, and then you had a prescription for 3 pairs of inserts, and you had a prescription for rocker soles, if you wanted to get the patient shoes, inserts, and rocker soles, you can do that, but you would not be able to bill Medicare for all 3 pairs of inserts. You could do the shoes, 2 pairs of inserts, and then the pair of rocker soles, they would get swapped out for the inserts. So the modifications that are covered are rocker soles, wedges, and metatarsal bars. There is one called A5507, and as you can see there, it just says not otherwise specified modification. I would be very careful with that one. The example that they list in the policy article for the therapeutic shoes for persons with diabetes benefit, the policy article specifically mentions a flare. So I would definitely feel comfortable doing it for a flare, a buttress, a stabilizer, something like that. I would just, again, it's you're dealing with the government, so I would caution you, against getting too creative with that. And then A5508 is another code where Medicare is assigned a code, but it's not actually a reimbursable code. So A5508 is a deluxe feature of a shoe, but it's not actually a reimbursable code. All right, so the last thing I want to talk to you about is the partial foot prosthesis. This is not part of the therapeutic shoe benefit, however, but you're going to come across patients that are missing a toe, multiple toes, or even, the distal third of their foot. It's called the transmetatarsal amputation. So L5000 is a prosthetic foot, and that's exactly what it is. So if you look on the fee schedule, every single line item on that fee schedule there's a column that says category code. All of the codes that we've talked about up until now, the category code for them is TS, which means therapeutic shoes. Category code for this guy is PO, stands for prosthetics and orthotics. So it plays by a whole different set of rules than everything we've talked about so far. Okay, the most important one probably is that where these are every calendar year, because this is a prosthetic device, this is based solely on medical necessity. Okay, so if they blow through it, wear it out, and it is just shot after 9 months, you're fine. You can go back to the doctor, get a new prescription, get a letter of medical necessity, get the notes, you're good to go. Okay, as long as it's medically necessary, they can get another one. Now, the other caveat is you cannot bill A5513 and 14 or A5513 or A5514 and L5000 on the same side. Okay, it's one or the other. And then you can't bill more than one unit on the same side per data service. Okay. Obviously, it would be a huge red flag if I made one of these for a patient today and then did another one next Wednesday. That's not medically necessary, right? But don't get hung up on that it has to be a calendar year. And another very, very common kind of misconception or an erroneous belief that I've come across working with customers for as long as I have is that a lot of people are under the assumption that this has to follow the same 5-year rule under Medicare as AFOs do. Okay, that's not a thing. It's never been a thing. It's a prosthetic device. So it's based purely on medical necessity. Okay, so like I said, 9 months, 10 months, a year, 2 years. I mean, whenever they need another one for medical reasons, they're good to go. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. For you to be the best shoe fitter that you can possibly be, I'm going to show you a whole lot of stuff throughout this course. Okay, we're going to start with a pretty extensive, detailed patient assessment. I'm going to show you how to do a quick gait analysis. We're going to check for skin integrity. We're going to identify deformities. We're going to check for vascularity. We are going to check for compromised sensation, all those good things. So you're going to get a good idea of what's actually going on with your patient's foot. Okay, then we're going to show you several methods of foot capture. Okay, so I'm going to show you a foam impression, how to take the best possible foam impression out there. And you'll see during the demo, I'm going to say there's not just one right way to do it, but there is one right, good, correct foam impression. I'm going to show you a very easily repeatable method that works very, very well. Again, I don't care what method you use, honestly, as long as your impression looks like my impression. But if you're brand new to this, I would say use the method that I'm going to show you because it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and most importantly, repeatable. Okay. And then my friend Zach is going to show you how to use the Procast scanner so that you can use actually an iPad or even your iPhone to take a scan of the foot. That's another way to do the capture. And then we're going to go over the different order forms for ordering those different devices. And then we're going to get out the Brannock device, and I'm going to show you a proper technique for measuring a foot with the Brannock device. And we will talk some about the importance of actually using a Brannock device to do those measurements. We'll review the Apex shoe fitting form, how to use that and why to use that. And then we'll talk about how to order the Apex shoes. And then we're going to show you how to heat moldable inserts. Again, show you a quick and easy, reliable technique for doing that. And then once we've got our inserts, we've got our shoes, we've got everything there, I'll show you how to properly dispense them and check to ensure that we do have a good fit. And we'll kind of go over the wear and care and break-in instructions that you should be giving to your patient. And then lastly, it won't be a demonstration. It'll be more of a PowerPoint type presentation, but I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive into the Medicare documentation for you. Because again, that's where the fun part is taking care of the patient, right? Doing your evaluation, seeing what's going on, taking the foam impressions or scan, whatever you decide to do, measuring them with the Brannock device, getting them in a great pair of shoes for them that they love, the first pair of shoes that they've had that actually is, fit them in their adult life. That's the fun part. The documentation is the not so fun part. So I want to make sure that you understand all the required documentation, because obviously getting on Medicare's bad side can ruin your day in a real hurry. So we want to keep you on Medicare's good side, and we'll go over all that documentation with you. So that's what you can look forward to. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the demos, and we're going to make some good shoe fitters out of y'all. All right. Thank you.